Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Alex Peacock now, who met my father just a few years ago when Alex was only 19 years old, so just a couple of years ago, in fact. Alex works in an architectural practice in Belfast. Over to you, Alex. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, just get my PowerPoint up there. Yes, can you hear me okay, yeah? Good. I think this will make it full screen here. Yeah. So, my talk is passing the torch of architectural beauty, and I've called it that because James took great pleasure in sort of teaching the younger generation his enormous knowledge of classical architecture and the history of architecture and all the beautiful things he loved. And when we met, he saw in me, I suppose, someone who was interested and willing to listen. And of course, he was just full of knowledge, full of excitement to tell me all he knew. And I was always very excited to listen to what he had to say. So the first time I met him, I went to visit his house in County Down, and what immediately struck me was...
Sorry.
Yes?
Is it possible to have it full screen so we don't see the borders?
I think this is because it's a PDF, whereas the other ones were in the form of a PowerPoint, you see, so it's the best you can get. But yeah, the first time we met, I visited his house here in County Down, and this is his office, his library, and to me it is what, defined him for me, his amazing library. And he gave me a great tour of it. He was so excited to show me all these different books, all these different paintings and drawings he had. And this is where, presumably, he wrote all his emails and his articles, and I imagine countless hours spent at this desk. And, recently I went to visit Dorota, and I went to the office, and it's still there, just preserved as he would have, as if he had went to the bathroom and he was going to come back in or something. It was very sad, going to his library, and it's still there, because I really did imagine he would just pop out and, give me a tour, show me something interesting. And there was a few times I'd visit him, and every time there was something in particular he was... Yes, good idea. There was something in particular he was sort of fixated with at the time, and he would give you a good lecture on whatever it was, and maybe it was the topic of some article he was doing at the time. Ah, yeah, there it is. But yeah, his library really struck me, and here it is there. There's his bust of himself and all these lovely, just curious things. And I have John Soane's museum here. They're very similar, they're both a space which, I guess, you can really understand the mind of someone through how they decorate their personal space. And for James, obviously, it attests to his many interests and his love of beautiful things. So we initially got on over his book, Making Dystopia, which I particularly related to after attending university, and you weren't really encouraged to do traditional architecture, classical architecture, and I knew something was off, just the amount of sort of nonsense things they would insist. Say, buildings must be off their time, things like that. So I could tell something was off, but Making Dystopia was a breath of fresh air. It really shone what was happening, and it gave me hope that there are people, everyone here, who advocate for beauty in architecture, sort of an honest and true beauty. So we initially got on over that, but our friendship blossomed, and we would constantly be emailing each other and talking about far more than just architecture. He was a fascinating man, but that's how it all began, Making Dystopia. And he really believed in this idea of drawing in order to see, and he really insisted that I sketch details and look at details of buildings in order to actually comprehend and understand how traditional architecture is put together. So under his encouragement, I did a lot of sketching. I began sketching a lot, and I would always show him my sketches, and he'd have little tweaks. He would tell me, say if I had drawn an entablature, he would tell me what was wrong, what needed fixed. But he kept me right, and he encouraged me to do a lot of sketching. So this is a variety of architecture around Belfast. And measure drawings. Yeah, he really encouraged me to actually go to buildings that I liked, just that I saw on the streets, and to measure them and draw them up and produce nice drawings. And he would obviously critique my drawings and make sure they were good and worthy of displaying. But through this studying buildings, having a sort of good look at buildings, it sort of makes it so that you can just eventually design without even really thinking too much, because you have this sort of bank of details that you've drawn, and that you just have this sort of, this sort of memory to just do something right after drawing it so many times in a new design. So after I had sketched and measured existing buildings, I was then able to make my own designs, and we would stay in touch, and we would always, he would make sure that my new designs were correct. He would tell me what was wrong with them, what needed fixed, but he would praise them, in a way that you couldn't really. It's not a type of learning you could do at university. If you were to show this at university, they would say it's simply not off our time or something, right? They wouldn't give a proper critique of the proportions of some certain part. So James was excellent for helping me learn the real details, the real deeper knowledge to be found of classical architecture. And I'm very grateful to him for that. Here's another project here. And I found myself thinking, this is the latest edition of classical architecture, which I loved, and we have it in the office in Belfast, and we do refer to it. It's not just some nice book of pretty pictures that sits on the wall. It's truly useful, has the proportions of the orders, and tons of examples of very fine buildings. So this is a book that, maybe even more than Making Dystopia, I refer to quite often. And then there's obviously the Oxford Dictionary. And James had this idea of sort of like the monasteries after the fall of Rome, continuing the sort of the ancient classics and knowledge of, say, classical architecture and beautiful things like that. He sort of saw himself as carrying this light of the knowledge of classical architecture into the future, and through this sort of age of modernism where it's more underground. But I imagine that to some degree he must have saw these books, these reference works, as maybe some vault for the future. Because imagine if someday in 1,000 years, society's in ruins, and someone discovered one of these, that would be enough to revive classical architecture, like how much of classical architecture is based on the works of Vitruvius alone. So I wonder if, to some extent, he thought these would be unearthed someday in the future and launch a renaissance. You never know. And some of his other books, Victorian architecture and Egyptomania, these sort of, in my opinion, attest to the variety of knowledge of architecture he had. There are very deep dives into a variety of styles, and I really love these books. Yeah, and that's my speech. Yeah, James was a great man, and I'm very grateful to him, and I hope he's looking down here on us all today and honoured by all of the speeches we're doing on him. Well, yeah.